In a quiet park in Moscow, there are not only parents looking over children, but guards with guns and reels of barbed wire. Just behind this park is Butyrka, one of the country's most notorious prisons. But the days of this institution could be numbered, so it is time to ask, just what scars has Russia endured behind those walls? In its earliest days, Butyrka was used by the Tsars to stifle dissent, famous for being a prison fortress. Even the magician Harry Houdini came to see if he could break out. But as Butyrka lived on, its legend turned to infamy. The Soviet leader Joseph Stalin's regime incarcerated and tortured countless people here. And outside, it said one could hear the victims' final screams.
This is a building where my father was sentenced to be shot.
Alexei's father was held in Butyrka before being ordered to his death from this building. And Alexei wants to make sure Russia never forgets.
Конечно, это слово, этот символ вообще вот несправедливых осуждений людей за это время государственного террора, многие захотят, так сказать, там, может быть, сделать какие-нибудь и мемориальные места.
By the 1990s, Butyrka had become a pre-trial detention centre. Inmates spoke of inhumane conditions, dozens packed into cells, living among sickness and filth. And after Vladimir Putin came to power, it began to be used in some of the biggest economic cases in the country. But campaigners say it was still a tool to pressure and break those who challenged the authorities. And as late as 2009, it cost at least one man his life. Sergei Magnitsky was a lawyer who exposed state corruption. But he was arrested and spent 11 months in Butyrka without trial. His diaries claim that he was denied medical treatment for crippling pancreatitis and stayed in freezing cells with up to 70 other people. 8 days before his mandatory release, he was rushed to another prison, but died that day. His company said in his dying hours he was handcuffed to a bed and beaten by 8 officers, because up until the last, he refused to change his testimony. The authorities deny Mr. Magnitsky was tortured and say he died of a heart attack. Even so, officials were sacked and Russia made a number of prison reforms. But in the years after, the businessman Alexei Kozlov was sent to Butyrka accused of fraud. He was eventually acquitted by the Supreme Court, but he says the prison was hell.
If you are the person to whom should be put some pressure, it will be completely disaster. So here, all finishes after, door closed. You're not beating them, You're just putting them at the cell with very low temperature, like for a winter. So I think, yes, it's the place where they can break people.
And the impact of Butyrka stays with inmates for years. We have disguised this former prisoner's identity because he fears he will be targeted by the authorities for speaking out. He says his time in Butyrka and other prisons ruined his life.
Вот, и, наверное, это было, и от меня это год скрывали, то есть мне об этом год не говорили. Вот, и я не знал этого. Вот, это, наверное, самый такой, самый сложный, самый печальный опыт. Ну, как опыт, это не опыт, это моя жизнь. Вот, по поводу там жесткого, естественно, у меня развалилась жизнь.
In recent years, the government has improved conditions. There are TVs in some cells, hot water, even reports of yoga classes. Inmates are able to learn some skills. But one public prisons monitor told us that bad conditions are still used to get confessions.
Мы этим занимались в первую очередь. Я помню, мы находили в ужасных камерах предпринимателей, которые обвинялись по экономическим статьям, и было понятно, что они оказались именно в этих камерах, где заведомо худшие условия, только для того, чтобы произвести впечатление на этих бизнесменов, и они стали давать признательные показания. Да, это все использовалось.
And here's the thing, Butyrka may just be the symbolic age facade of a justice system under strain. Behind me, some say Russia's prison problems are only just beginning. Last year, videos emerged of guards torturing inmates at other prisons. And President Putin admitted in March that there are still questions over Russian justice.
Сегодня почти половина дел, 45%, возбужденных в отношении предпринимателей, прекращается, не доходя до суда. Что это значит? Это значит, что возбуждали кое-как или по непонятным соображениям.
We asked Butyrka, the prison's authority and MPs for interviews, but nobody agreed to speak to us. In recent years, the government has passed a law to ease sentences, which should take pressure off prisons. Authorities say they investigate every case of mistreatment and abuse, plus they say they are planning to close Butyrka and replace it with a new prison. But given the long history of allegations against Butyrka, we wanted to ask them how can they ensure this never happens again? To that question, we do not have an answer. So until a government promise becomes action, Butyrka lives on, in a prison system still mired in controversy, but in a country with so much corruption, many here believe it will never close. And if they're right, by the time these children grow old, Butyrka will still be looking over Russia's shoulders. Dan Ashby, CNA, Moscow.